Shh. Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting boomers.
Get a real man.
There's one now. Oh man, nothing quite like making fun of a group to help ease the gap between that group and electric bike riders, because let's be real, there's a little bit of friction going on between the ICE boys and electric boys out there. But come on, y'all, we just like motorcycles. We like two wheels. This is a motorcycle. And today we are going to be taking a look at this Livewire One right here. They've actually sent me this motorcycle and I've had it for like 2 months. I've just been hanging out, riding this bike, enjoying it, really getting to know this machine. And today it is time for me to do my day in the saddle on it. And guys, I'm gonna cut straight to the chase here. What we're dealing with, this is a true American sport bike, and it is a crying shame that some people are just gonna write it off entirely because it's an electric motorcycle. But my goal today is to at least get you to go out there and try it one time. And in aid of doing that, let's get right out into the twisties and check out what this thing can do.
Twisty Road time, baby. This is one of the best parts about this motorcycle, is how it feels around a corner. I am not lying whenever I say that this is a true American sport bike, man. I've been dying for an American motorcycle that can go toe-to-toe with Japanese and European bikes in a corner. And you know what? The FTR Carbon, yeah, it's there, but I want one that has Harley parts on it, man. I want Harley Davidson to throw down with the European companies. And with this Livewire One, man, god damn, does it handle so well around a corner. It is so much fun to rip around a corner because it's fast, it's agile. The brakes are great. This thing is set up so well to just demolish canyons and corners. It's a great ride. And one of the things that is just great about electric bikes generally is, especially when you have the customizable ride modes in here, I've got engine regen braking all the way cranked up to the max. So going around a corner, you roll off and it's like perfect trail braking. It makes riding a twisty road so easy. It almost feels like cheating, man. It really does. Yeah, is the bike a little bit heavier than your average sport bike? Sure, no doubt. I would say it goes a little bit further than a little bit heavier, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So let's get a little bit more specific. So this bike's packing show-up fully adjustable suspension, which I kept thinking it was like the same stuff that you see on the R1. It's not. It's a slightly different fork setup. Don't get me wrong. It's not any worse. It's just not the same kit. I feel like I've said that in the past. It's not. The motor, and the throttle response, it's tuned really, really well. One of the things I love about Livewire and Energica versus Zero is you can tell that they were built by motorcyclists, and they tuned the throttle to respond like a motorcycle would, versus the Zero, which tends to feel a little artificial and a little linear. It really doesn't feel like there's just this layer of technology between me and the wheels. I really feel like I'm getting proper engine throttle response here. My right hand does what it should, and the motorcycle does what it should in response. That's awesome. Now, brakes on this bad boy. We've got big honkin' stonkin' Brembos up front that do what they need to do. They stop the bike. However, I would argue they're not as efficient as they could be. A couple of things there. I think that the weight is causing them to work extra hard, but I also think they're let down slightly by a Harley Davidson master cylinder here. These clusters came right off of a Softail, and I reckon that, yeah, this is the internals on this have probably been tuned a little bit, but I would prefer to just have a Brembo master cylinder on here. And now that Livewire is its own entity, yeah, it's still 70% Harley Davidson, but I'd like to see them take a little bit more freedom and put better parts on here. I understand why this is here. It's a cost savings measure because it's already been developed and they don't need to spend money on it. But I'd like to see on a sport bike more sporting setup. Man, I honestly, guys, this thing just puts a smile on my face every time I whack the throttle open, especially in my custom ride modes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it just, oh, it handles beautifully. It feels so good. Go bike! Oh man, it's so easy to ride this thing so fast. I love it. I love it. Let's pull this thing over. Let's calm down a little bit and let's talk about the specs on this motorcycle and some of my pros and cons, because there's so much to say about this bike.
Now, before we dive into those specs, I need to take a second and shout out our sponsor for today's video, Insta360. Have you ever wondered how I get some of those cool shots off my handlebars? It's thanks to this, their X3 360-degree camera. I've been riding with one of these bad boys on my handlebars for almost a year, and they're a great way to capture everything around you. Whether you're looking for a second camera to add some flair to your videos, or you just want to capture some cool moments to share with your friends, it's quick and easy to get great looking footage and edit it or upload it straight from their app. Check out the Insta360 X3 by clicking the link down in the description below, and a huge shout out to Insta360 for sponsoring this video. Diving on into the specs on this bad boy, we have a 0cc motorcycle. Because it doesn't have an engine, it's got a motor. Okay, yeah, it's making 100 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque, which is pretty darn zesty, but it's hampered slightly by a 562-pound wet weight. That's not terrible when you consider the other electric bikes out there, stuff like the Ego, the Ava Rebella, the Zeros. They're all right around the mid 500s. They're just portly motorcycles because batteries are heavy things, but this thing is still a ton of fun. Now, throwing a leg over this bike and talking about the ergonomics, this is actually a really accommodating package. It's heavy to get off the kickstand, but once you're sitting on it upright, it doesn't really weigh a whole lot, and it carries its weight super well. I've got a very aggressive bend in the knee right here. I can flat foot this thing easily. It's a 30-inch seat height. The only thing that's a little bit odd is the peg height. It feels really high for what it is. I know that, you know, they're looking for ground clearance and so forth, but you can't take these on a racetrack. So you can lower the pegs just a little bit, give me some more room, it'd be more comfortable. And this is a pretty aggressive slant from the hips up to reach to the bars. I don't like riding with my arms completely straight. I like a soft bend, which means I'm constantly like this. I don't mind that, but if you're looking for something that's more standard, this isn't that riding experience. It's very much a sporting motorcycle. And that right there is going to give me a great opportunity to talk about my pros and cons on this thing. As you saw in the Twisty Roads section, this is a brilliant handling motorcycle. It's truly an American sport bike. I'm gonna say it again later in the wrap up, and I know you've heard me say it 1,000 times. This proves that when Harley Davidson sets its mind to something, they can make something truly special. And it infuriates me to no end that they just keep doing the same old thing. This is a brilliant motorcycle. However, it's got some cons. We got to talk about the range, and we have to talk about the charge time, because I know this is going to come up I know people are gonna talk about it and say it's the biggest con on this motorcycle. They claim 100-mile range or 146-mile range in the city, a little bit less when you combine city and highway. Me personally, I charged this thing up when I started it this morning. It had 111 miles in the tank. And now that I've been riding it around, I've been doing a mix of highway riding, twisty road riding, aggressive on the throttle, in eco mode, all over the place. And I have 56 miles worth of range left. I have done 42.7 miles on this bike. Now, that would suggest that I could get 82 miles worth of range. That's not terrible. Honestly, it's really not. But you gotta consider the charge time. On level 1 for me, which is the only thing I have, you know, your average 120 socket in the garage, it takes all night for me to charge this thing. No biggie, because I'm not riding all night long, and most of the time the bike is just sitting in the garage anyway. On DC fast charge from 20 to 80, they claim about 35 minutes, which isn't bad. You go in, you get your sandwich, plug it in at an HEB or whatever, and you're ready to rock and roll by the time you come out. Those aren't available everywhere though, so it's worth pointing out. Now, the last pro or con, depending on how you view it, is going to be the price on this motorcycle. This thing costs $22,799, so 23 grand. You're gonna pay a little bit more out the door, but there are tax incentives that you're gonna get for getting an electric bike that are going to help reduce some of that price, but it's like a rebate. You have to pay your big chunk of change, and then you get some cash back to offset it. Now, this is a premium motorcycle, and for the parts in here, 22,000 bucks, probably a little bit high. I'd like to see it around about 18, at about 18,000 bucks. This is a really, really great riding experience. However, for those folks out there who are like, dude, that's a ton of money for a bike I can't do more than 100 miles on, you're right. You're absolutely right. This kind of motorcycle really is the other bike you have in the stable. You have your ICE bike, or this is your weekend toy, or you're just commuting in a really tight city environment, something like Chicago, New York, LA, Houston, Dallas. Even here in Austin, we have charging ports everywhere. It's hard to make the case for this being your sole motorcycle experience because you can't get out and do big long rides. But I've talked enough, and there's way more to say about this motorcycle, especially out on the highway. So let's get out there, let's hit the road, and let's see what this thing can do on a big fat slab of Texas highway.
Alrighty guys, the highway is definitely the Achilles heel of the Livewire, and it's for one reason and one reason only. But let's start with the good stuff. So first of all, I mean, this bike's great for cruising down the highway. You've got yourself, you know, relatively comfortable ergonomics. It's a little bit more aggressive than your standard naked bike. I reckon that's largely due to the length here to accommodate the battery. But for short jaunts on the highway, it's no problem. You've also got really easy to use cruise control. It's just, you know, standard Harley fare, button on, button down, and then you've got your roll to kill. Really stable platform on the highway too, thanks to this thing's weight and the way that it carries the weight. You can see I don't really need to have my hands on the handlebars to steer the thing. I can steer it south of my hips with just my shifting my weight around, and it tracks really, really straight. You know, sometimes you get on a naked bike and they're very twitchy. This one's not. I reckon that's probably down to A, the weight, and B, a slightly longer wheelbase. But, you know, in terms of cruising down the highway, I mean, it's awesome. And, you know, we're currently in the Leaf mode, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but it's not like I don't have passing power. It just takes a little bit longer to get there. So if I were to drop it into my preferred A mode, which I always set up A modes on all the Harleys that I ride that have this, because A mode is just, oh, it's so much fun. it's where I go in and customize all of my settings, and of course you can do that on here, adjusting your regen. Really, in A mode, I just have maxed out everything. I have maxed power, maxed throttle response, and maxed regen. It's about as aggressive as this motorcycle can get, and I think it really shines in A mode. It feels really great. So that's the good. Now let's talk about the bad. So highway riding is it's the hardest thing for any electric bike to do. Why? Because they only have one gear. They have one forward gear. And it's basically you're using the same gear to cruise around the city as you are on the highway, which means this thing is spinning really fast and consuming a lot of power. I started today with 111 miles on the tank, and this is the very first thing I'm filming because I am worried about range a little bit. These day in the saddles, I do a long day. I am slightly worried about the range. Started with 111. I have not gone 20 miles, and yet I've lost 20 miles off the total range. Now, that's not a big deal if you're using this thing as a commuter and, you're pulling into your office, which office buildings nowadays have charging ports, or if you're running errands and you stop off at like an HEB. HEBs have charging ports now. So you can put it on a level 2 charge and get a big charge while you're waiting, and it costs like $3. But, if you're just trying to do a long ride, and like me here in Austin, it takes me an hour to get out to any of my favorite twisty roads that are, further than just the usual haunts. It's tough on this thing, man. It really is, and there's no way to get around it. Now, with all of that being said, do I think that this is a bad motorcycle because of the range? God, no. God, no. This is a great bike, and on the highway, it's awesome. I just really wish that electric bikes would do what like Tesla's done, where they have a city gear and a highway gear. Instead, I just end up rolling around in leaf mode to avoid myself using all of the like crazy torque because, we're here at 60 miles an hour, go into A mode. And this thing just comes to life, man. It's crazy how much the electronics change the riding experience on this thing, and it becomes a properly aggressive bike. It's got MT09 levels of acceleration. It's got Duke 890R levels of acceleration. But to use that, it's a double-edged sword because you tear through the range so fast. So it's just a balancing act, and I really wish that we had a highway gear to just lower the cruising RPM of this thing, get it so that when it's cruising, it's just a little bit happier, and we get a little bit more range. I think that would really help these bikes, and I'm really hopeful that we start seeing that soon. I know some people are looking into it. I'm not sure if I can say who yet, but I know that there's at least one company looking into it, and there's no way they're alone. But with all of that being said, there was a lot to talk about here, so I'm sorry if I rambled. But let's pull this thing over and answer some Discord questions and see what they have to say.
All right, diving on into the questions and answers. Remember, if you guys want to participate in this, all you got to do is click that link down in the description below. Check out the Patreon. That is the best way for you to support the channel. You get discounts on merch. You get yourself weekly live streams, all sorts of fun stuff down in the description below. Click that link and check it out for yourself. And in the meantime, let's answer some questions. Don ATX, are there any issues with the battery getting hot in the heat? No, it's actually one of the best parts about this thing. The bike physically gets hot, like the sun beating down on it, but it doesn't get like hot like a motor does. It's actually really, really nice, especially if you have to commute through the city or in traffic in the summer. Everybody knows how much it sucks on an ICE bike. It is no big deal on the Livewire, which is awesome. So I know there's gonna be a lot of this, but I'm gonna pick one. BEZ0511, how's the recharge runtime versus the Energica? I'm gonna assume you mean the Ava Rebella, although a lot of them are very, very similar. The Ava's got a bigger battery. It charges in about the same amount of time as this thing. And because it's got a more fast discharge rate, it makes more power, it consumes its power at about the same rate. Most of these electric bikes, they actually run very, very similarly. The question is, how much power do you want to get out of it while it's running? The Energica, more power, more consumption, versus the Livewire, less power, less consumption, same-ish range. At least that's been my experience. Quips and Guac, how much do oil changes cost? Nothing. Very low maintenance cost on this motorcycle, which is a pro that I missed in my pros section, but there's so much to talk about. I had to leave some stuff out. On a more serious note, do you see Harley making a whole line of Livewire bikes beyond Naked Cruiser Hybrid in the near future? I'd love to see, now that Livewire is its own company, I'd love to see them take directions that Harley Davidson wouldn't. But I'd also like to see Harley Davidson make an E-Glide, or a Glide E or something like that. Take a massive battery, like the biggest in the industry, and put it in their Glide, the touring frame, and make a Glide around it, and just get like 200 or 300 miles of range out of it. That would be really cool. Blotter asking, has there been any noticeable changes to the Livewire since it was first released, or is it the usual Harley method of paint code changes only? And this was seconded by Great Egret, the editor. His stuff is down below. Yeah, this has been pretty much set it and forget it. There have been some changes that are minimal. I'm sure that the guys at Livewire would give me the whole list of changes, but in terms of like big flagship issues, really the biggest thing to talk about was when this went into Livewire Solo and it doesn't have the Harley badge. Lost $8,000 on the price. Full Metal Corgi asking a great question here. If offered for free and you could not resell, would you take the Livewire or the Versus 650? Livewire all day. This thing has way more personality than a Versus 650. One of the coolest things about this bike is it actually has haptic feedback. When you're sitting at a stoplight, it has this heartbeat function. This thing actually like shuts off stuff. It opens and closes things. It spins the motor. It does a lot of stuff to give it this feedback when you're sitting at a stop. It's subtle, but it's there, and I love it. I love the way it sounds. This thing is a very unique bike, and I really like electric motorcycles a ton. And that's gonna do it for the questions and answers. Let's get this thing out one last time, start wrapping up my thoughts on this bike here.
Now, if it's not clear enough already, I really like the Livewire, and there is always going to be a spot in my garage for an electric motorcycle because I just generally really like the concept. I think that they're very cool bikes. I've kind of flip-flopped a little bit on electric bikes, but I've landed on the side of, yes, I want one. I really do want a full-size electric motorcycle in my garage. I just can't afford to put one there right now because there's still early adopter technology and they are a little expensive. I can't afford 22.7, but you know, maybe a used one later on down the line. Sure, I could make the case for one of these in the garage. They're so convenient. You turn them on and they're just ready to rock and roll. And this is a fun motorcycle. It's a properly fun bike. I totally get how somebody would ride one of these and be like, no, not for me. I want this, that, or the other thing that you don't get from electric. Or somebody being like, look, I like them, but the range is brutal. I can't do the kind of riding that I would like to do on this motorcycle. That I also completely understand. It's fine to not like electric bikes. It really is. But ride them before you make that decision. Come at them. Give yourself a reason to not like it beyond what you've read in articles and seen online. I highly recommend that you check one of these motorcycles out. I give this a double thumbs up, man. I really do. This is a great bike. Now, I'd like to end this review not talking about this bike generally, but bringing it back, as I so often do anytime I ride a motorcycle with the bar and shield on it. And this does have the bar and shield down on the battery cover. It's got a big old bar and shield. And this is, I mean, look at it, guys. It's a freaking Harley cockpit. Oh, this bike makes me so mad. It makes me so mad. Yes, Livewire is now its own company, but it's 70% owned by Harley Davidson. Jochen Zietz is the CEO of Livewire, in the same way that he's the CEO of Harley Davidson. And this bike was built by Harley Davidson. It makes me so mad. Oh my God, it makes me so mad to see what Harley Davidson is capable of. The kind of boundary pushing behavior they can have, and the just way that they can succeed at their first at bat at stuff, and they just don't do it. This is so good. They could make a naked bike with an ICE motor in it that is phenomenal. Harley can push the boundaries like nobody else can. I truly believe that. And it wounds me to my core that they don't. I'm really hoping that Livewire, as its own thing, can get out there and can do some of this game-changing stuff that Harley can't do under the Harley brand for whatever reason. Well, guys, that is going to wrap up this video. A huge shout out to Livewire for sending me this bike, and I'm going to go inside before I absolutely keel over because it's so hot outside. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.